Welcome to the latest episode of We Went to Miami with I am joined by the fabulous Lara Krug. Lara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And before we get into all of it, two housekeeping things for our listeners. Those who may be listening on Spotify or YouTube, you may be thinking, where in the world am I? This is not the usual background. To which I say, I'm at my sister's house. My niece was recently born, and I am on the postpartum care crew. So I'm taking this call from my brother-in-law's office, which is not the normal set for the podcast. So bear with me and some of the artwork of the paper plates in the background. And second of all, Laura, was on our wish list from the get-go when we were dreaming of people we wanted to have on the podcast. But for those of our listeners who may not recognize your name, they'll surely recognize some of the organizations you belong to. Laura, in your own words, do you want to describe your position and what you kind of do day to day?
Sure. And thank you again for having me. I love Miami. I love seeing it so much in the news right now for the amazing men and women's basketball team performance. So I am currently the Chief Media and Marketing Officer of the Kansas City Chiefs. I have been with the organization for almost 5 years and really oversee all elements of the brand from brand strategy, creative design, production, social, digital, kind of everything in between on that side of things, led by my amazing team here in Kansas City.
That's incredible. And even you just explaining the fact that you do digital, you do social production, like everything somehow still seems like an understatement for your role.
There's a lot that goes into the role. I feel like I've been here almost 5 years, and I was just saying it kinda still feels like day one, um, in some ways and others and not, but, yeah, there's a lot that fits, under my purview. I was I am the first CMO here at the Chiefs, and so when you come into a new role or creating a role, you can imagine that it continues to evolve over time, and have been very fortunate to be here through a lot of the excitement over the last couple of years.
And like even I would say I'm not the biggest sports watcher, but like the Kansas City Chiefs hugely recognized brand. And I feel like, especially in the recent years, like that's happened, and I'm sure that's not a coincidence. And probably largely due to the work your team does. When you joined 5 years ago, did you join as CMO or how
I
did that?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, so I joined, I had been with Anheuser-Busch, before that in, various different roles, both in the global side and the US side of the business, always in marketing, but in different roles, whether it was running sponsorship and experiential, running media, and then running kind of brand, as we would call it. And my last role was overseeing Stella Artois as the VP of the brand in the US. And so when I joined and was recruited by the Chiefs, I came in for the CMO role. So it was, the brand speaks for itself in many ways. I didn't also grow up as a massive NFL fan by any means. I actually, I guess, became a Chiefs fan a little bit in college because my husband, who I am a Miami merger, is from Kansas City as well. So I knew a bit about it through him. Yeah, it was sitting on a history of just amazing stories and amazing foundation, and so I've just gotten to, come in and be part of something and help it grow, but I was starting on something that was very solid when I came in.
Also, just one, congrats on being a merger. That's super exciting. And I
Thank you.
that. Also, I'm sure your husband was like probably cheering the loudest when you got this. In my head, you just like one day got a phone call from like the Chiefs, and him being a Chiefs fan itself, I'm sure that was like a very, very fun moment in your household. But
It was.
how does one get recruited by the Chiefs to be their first ever CMO? I mean, what does that even look like?
Well, I think the actual process, is probably less exciting, I guess, in some ways than some may think, just in terms of recruiters and interviews like everything else. I think the, I guess, bigger philosophical way that I ended up here was through many, many years of building in my career, from working, as an assistant media planner in my very first job at a college and moving to New York after Miami to, working at Avon for many years to working
Okay.
at L'Oreal in many years and then Anheuser-Busch. So um, metaphorically, it was a phone call originally by a recruiter for the first time hearing about the role, but, I don't think I would have even probably been on the list to be considered if it had not been for many years of experience and building on my skill set along the way at those other places.
That's incredible. Even just dropping some of the brands you've worked with, it seems like you've even experimented with industry, which is really exciting. Obviously, we're going to get to your Miami journey, but kind of just, hearing you went from beauty slash fashion to even then food and bev and then switching and now being in sports and entertainment. How did you keep yourself nimble enough to like move industry and not be afraid? Because I feel like so many people, especially younger folks, a lot of advice we hear is like, you got to stick to your niche, you have to stick to one industry. And it seems like that was, like, the opposite of your career journey.
It really was. When I and not to go back into my kind of journey from Miami, but I think it was part of it. When I was at Miami, I focused on mass communication and marketing and as a minor, and I was always really interested in media, podcasts, pop culture, audience, like entertainment. I'm not sure I was using all of those
Yeah.
terminology when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, but that was always what I loved to do. My dad was kind of in that marketing, advertising, entertainment. That was his career. So I knew about it. And so when I graduated, I was given advice. I wanted to move back to New York. I'm from the East Coast. I was born and raised in Connecticut. My dad worked in New York City for, 45 years. So I wanted to move back to New York. And I was given the advice by a mentor to consider looking at a media agency. She said, it sounds like you're creative, but not necessarily in the creative development in that sense of the word, but creative in terms of storytelling, in terms of loving to understand people. And so I think starting there, I worked on a lot of different industries, as you can imagine, and I'm sure you may have heard from others when you start your career, certainly at an agency, you oftentimes have a roster of clients. So I
Yeah.
had the car, I had New Balance, I
Oh, wow.
had a hearing aid company, I had Tamiflu, like pharmaceutical. So I think I was exposed really early on to building, strategies and media plans against all sorts of industries. And that I think in some ways opened my eyes to thinking that, there are more than just one way to consider being a marketer. I also love a challenge. um, I don't think I realized that I don't think I knew that I got bored easily, but I think what I love to do is be challenged. I have a very, I guess, entrepreneurial mindset. I like autonomy. And so it was more on what is the challenge that I could take on, even if it was a different industry. And so I had to figure it out. I wanted to grow. I wanted to be promoted. I wanted new challenges. And so I took the mindset of focusing less on specific industry and on a perfect linear path and more following a bit of my gut in terms of if I can take a new role that can give me a new experience or a new challenge, I think that's going to be more fruitful in the long run, which thankfully it has been for me so far.
I love that, and even that notion of, like, not being able to be bored and, like, wanting a challenge, one I personally resonate with so much, and also I feel like generally is very Miami coded.
That's
Like
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
The last person I interviewed for this season, granted I don't know, the order of the episodes quite yet, was Rebecca Messina, who was Uber's first global CMO,
Wow.
and she had very similar advice where it was just like, you kinda have to go where the path takes you and where you feel like you're being challenged. To even hear, like, I feel like you had, like, the liberal arts experience of, like, post-grad as well, being in the
Yeah.
agency of, like, working on New Balance and Tamiflu at the same time is wild.
Very different, very different brands. And New Balance at the time was not, I mean, New Balance is like the coolest kid on the block now.
Yeah.
So back then, they weren't as, I think as kind of part of culture in that way. So, yeah, I think it forced me to understand different types of businesses, business models. It forced me to understand and be comfortable with working on businesses where one might have been like a turnaround story versus the other one was an acceleration story. One is more seasonal. So, like, all those inputs very early on, I think allowed me to have, like, I imagine it almost like a stacking, like all these inputs allowed me to have a very different perspective or a more open-minded perspective on jobs and my career path. I think I've been really curious my whole life, whether or not I understood that young and being at college. I think young people are so much more attuned to their strengths and weaknesses now. I feel like an old lady, I guess, in some ways that
No.
yeah, I've now figured that out. But I think curiosity was a huge driver and a huge skill that I look for in talent. And being willing to kind of roll up your sleeves and figure it out, I think has been something that's motivated me. And I think, yeah, probably was a lot of, um, honestly, I grew up in Connecticut and going to school in Ohio probably had that same level of curiosity from day one. It's not
Yeah.
like I knew
What
one
to expect.
girl, one woman, the woman, but I knew one girl that I had played softball with in high school. She went to Miami. She was a year above me.
Okay.
We were kind of similar, but that was I guess my curiosity started even choosing Miami. It wasn't at the time. I know it's obviously gotten to be a much more national school, which is awesome, but it wasn't like the place that everyone from my little town in Connecticut was going. So I think that curiosity was kind of built within me, and I think Miami, I think, was a probably an early example of showing in that even before my career.
And that's a great segue. How did you end up at Miami from your small town in Connecticut?
So that was part of it. I knew I wanted to go to a big kind of classic feeling college. I don't know why I did, but that was kind of always what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I remember my parents, my brother went to Villanova, which
Oh,
was I was a good student, but I wasn't, top of my
yeah.
class. And so I think my parents tried to give me exposure to different types of thoughts on colleges. And so, yeah, we the Midwest was always kind of where I was looking in a variety of different places from Pennsylvania over. I think that's where so many of the big colleges were in the focal point. And so, yeah, this young woman who went to Miami was a year above me. We played sports together growing up. We had very similar academics, I think personalities, kind of easygoing, curious. And so we did the road trip. Well, we did, I guess, the flight trip at the time,
Oh,
and we went and saw a bunch of schools in Ohio. We saw Miami, went to Indiana, and I just fell in love with Miami. I mean, I think I applied early, as well as Indiana, got into both, and ultimately chose Miami. I think for the size, for the school, for the environment, for the town, kind of for everything. Although the story that we tell later, or my mom tells later, is that we flew into Dayton and I fell asleep on the car ride from Dayton to Oxford, and it wasn't until I came back to move in that I stayed awake from the the trip from Dayton to Oxford, so I hadn't seen some of the, like,
yeah.
more farmland, and so I was like, "Where am I? What is happening?" Coming from an
Yeah.
East Coast girl. I joke now that my mom's like, "You should have stayed awake." But yeah, no, that was how I got there, that's how I focus, and then, yeah, I it was a pretty quick decision. I gotten an early admission, and so I agreed or, committed pretty early and loved kind of every day during it.
I love that. And I know you mentioned your minor in mass comm, but what was your major at Miami? And
My major was actually mass
oh, was
communications.
it? Okay.
My major was mass comm, my minor was marketing.
Okay.
Again, I don't think I went in, I don't remember, so I certainly was not one of those high school graduates that had a clear direction on what I wanted to do. Communication, I think in general was interesting, like I said, kinda entertainment, broadcast, media, film, that kind of thing, and so mass comm was where I'd focus, and then during my time there, I decided that to get the marketing minor, um, and build upon it, and again, I look back and it was probably the best decision I made to have both, but again, I think Miami did a really nice job at helping find classes and a direction based on your skill set. Like I was saying, I'm very clear on I'm very clear on what my strengths are, and that type of communication, that type of liberal arts kind of education I really felt most comfortable in. I've gotten better at math and financials as you have to as you
Yeah,
get into your career. And that's just the truth of it. I tell my kids that now, you don't have to be the best, but you do have
you
to
need to
understand.
know. Yeah,
I'm so very thankful that Miami allowed a marketing minor too, so I got exposure to the
yeah.
business side without necessarily having that be my major.
I'm in business school currently, and,
Okay.
at Miami, I was emerging tech for business and political science. When I graduated, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know the math side of anything," which is how I found myself in business school, but I agree, like, I wish I had definitely tapped into farmer a bit more maybe when I was on campus.
Yeah, and I again, it's been quite a while now since I was in college, but it's really remarkable to see what Miami's really done in terms of investing in their business school. Again, it was there when I went through. I think it's certainly become a much more um uh, known entity. So I loved kind of getting to navigate classes, and I remember I had psych classes, and I dabbled in some things to see if there was another interest, but mass communication was where I focused, and certainly, I think has applied really well in my career.
I love that. So you're majoring in mass comm, you've got a minor in marketing. We know that after Miami, you end up in New York briefly, but what did your 4 years at Miami look like? What extracurriculars were you a part of? Where could you be found on campus? Like, what did life
Yeah. So I will say, so I was in a sorority. Although again, I always joke, I'm like, man, I was really not that good of a sorority girl. But I was an Alpha Z Delta. So that was from a social aspect. I did Laws Hall, which I don't know if it's
it's
still
still there.
it
I
does.
was
Okay, so I adored the Laws Hall program. I think that was really when it started all coming together for me when I realized, wow, I can work on a real client and I'm starting to understand like applying what I'm learning in class. So Laws Hall and that entire process was amazing. I did club sports. I rowed in college, excuse me, in high school. And so while rowing wasn't a really big deal out in Miami, I had done a little bit. There was a club
awesome.
of rowing for a little while out at the lake, which I'm going to forget the name of
Oh
it.
gosh, yeah, I know it's in the
It's in the park.
Houston Woods.
Okay, yes, Houston Woods. There used to be a hotel there too, which I don't know if
It's
that
still
still exists.
there. It's a conference center now.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
I
I
haven't
used
been
to
back
row
in a
there.
while. Okay, yeah, I came back from a bunch of my friends and we all went back and my then boyfriend, now husband, went back for a 5 year, but I've not unfortunately been back since. But where could I be found? I mean, pretty much everything.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
the bars and restaurants, Bagel and Deli and Brick Street, which seems like a nightclub now, which was not
Yes.
like that
Was it
growing
not
up.
like that back in the day?
I mean, it was a party bar, but I don't remember it being on like, I mean, Barstool and ESPN. Now
Yeah, yeah.
I'm seeing it everywhere. I had a great group of friends. I have a great group of friends that I still am very close with from Miami. But yeah, I loved I'd be at the library. We would go to a lot of the football games. One of our friends was a football player at the time. So I think a pretty
You're
average
everywhere, yeah.
college experience. Yeah. There was not a lack of fun being had along the way.
I love that, and I feel like that's just the Miami experience, and did you meet your now husband while you were at Miami, like, during your 4
I
years?
did. Yeah, so we have a very classic Miami merger, I don't know, or Miami merger story. Colin and I actually met at college orientation before we
Oh,
started.
shut
Yeah,
up.
so I don't know if orientation is still done this way. It was done in June before we went there.
Yes,
Um, we went, my mom took me and we lived in dorms for the weekend. I believe because I ended up my dorm was Emerson freshman year. It was I forgot the other dorm there that we stayed in for orientation weekend. And my husband Colin was there as well, and his best friend who was a girl had come and was there as well. And so Sydney Stoops lived across from me at college orientation. I had lost my suitcase along the
oh,
way, so I had on one outfit, and Sydney was like, "You can borrow my clothes," like, she was so sweet, and so she was like, I think there was, like, a mixer or whatever it was
They
called,
still do
and
that, yeah.
still do all that. Okay, good, and it was down in the quad, and, yeah, Sydney and I went down, she's like, "Oh, this is my friend Colin," and literally, we did not start dating officially till the end of sophomore year, but we spent the
And you
weekends
just still
together.
dating?
Our
Oh,
parents met when we met. We then ultimately, unbeknownst to us, we actually got married 10 years to the day.
Laura, shut up. This is like a Miami
I
dream.
know, it's a really cheesy Miami
No, but
merger
it's
story.
perfect.
Yeah, but we didn't know it until, like, the week of our wedding, and,
Wow.
you're getting all the pictures together for the rehearsal dinner, and we found a
That's very
picture of us when we
artistic.
met,
Mm.
and at the bottom, it said June 8th, 2003, and we got married on June 8th, 2013.
Well, not and, like, the alumni team is gonna be so proud of me. FYI, June 8th is alumni weekend this year, in case
Shout
you
out.
guys wanna go. But
Right, we'll see if we can make it up to Oxford. Our kids have not gone yet, so we do keep telling them that, we'll take them so that they can.
yeah, absolutely. No, but that's incredible, and also just thank you for, sharing your guys' beautiful story about just meeting each other, very Miami coded, and also
In
just
Miami.
I feel like so many people resonate. I am not lucky enough to be a Miami major myself. However, um, a lot of my friends, my peers, folks at Miami who are I mean, it is such a I mean, your partner is a huge part of your life, and, like, being able to have found that at Miami, 1 is just so wonderful, but also, like, the fact that, like, you guys got married 10 years to the day of meeting at like, shut up.
It's like, I don't know if people always believe that story, but it's true. And no, it was, I think Miami, again, just brought really good people together.
Yeah.
I think it was my mother-in-law always jokes that, like, I was very normal, which is why she likes me, which I'm not sure what that totally means, but I take it as a positive, and I think there was a lot of people like that at Miami that, wanted to have a great college experience. Obviously, so many very smart, wonderful people, but maybe we're looking for that really well-rounded college
Yeah.
experience, being in Oxford away from, major cities, right? Having kind of that classic, or what I thought was gonna be a classic college experience. So, yeah, I think that was a lot of some of my literally best friends are still from Miami. My friend Allison, it was in my wedding. We met in freshman year. So, I feel very fortunate that, I got to go through that experience. And yeah, and there's just really good people.
That's incredible, and, like, even my own best friend, I found out Miami, she is a merger.
Love it.
Couldn't agree more, and, like, I feel like so many people resonate with just, like, they just found their tribe early on and grateful that Oxford was that place for so many people,
Yeah.
and I know you mentioned when you graduated, you ended up in the agency side in New York, but leading up to graduation, were you the person who, like, had this lined up for, like, months and months? Were you on the stress end of trying to figure out where to go and having a bit of a mid-20 crisis? How did that go for you?
Yeah, good question. So I interned every single year of
Okay.
college. So that was, I don't remember if someone told me to do that or if I just felt like I needed to, but I interned every year in different capacities. So one summer I interned at, buying department at a
Oh,
high-end
cool.
fashion store. I had kind of always been a little bit interested in fashion. The next summer, I don't even think they still do unpaid internships, hopefully not, but I had an
They
unpaid
do.
internship. Yeah, I did an unpaid internship at a magazine,
Okay.
that no longer exists. It was called Jane Magazine, and it wasn't glamorous, but it taught me being in a workplace setting. So I was literally worked in the beauty department, like filing in order magazines and cleaning the beauty closet. But I did that one summer every day. And then my last summer before college, I did get an internship at NBC
Oh, cool.
New York, and that was hugely, I think kind of pivotal and impactful in terms of how I figured out what I wanted to do next. Like I said, I'd been interested in broadcast journalism. I knew I wasn't going to be necessarily a journalist, and I wasn't gonna be on TV or anything, but I interned in the affiliates department in NBC in New York, which was essentially you would work with affiliates, which would be all of the NBC stations around the US. in terms of sending them promotions, right? So if you watch NBC and the Today Show, if you're in Cincinnati, right, they would throw it back to the Cincinnati local NBC station, and then they would show what was going on the national news. So I worked in that department for the summer. I loved it. I really got to understand more of the business side of media and opportunity. I also quickly realized, and I think it's important to understand what you want and what you need. They had asked if I would want to join or would want to apply to the page program at NBC, which is kind of their formal, almost like internship once you graduate process. Many people in very high positions at NBC started as pages, they're called, which I thought was really interesting. But again, the financial model, I don't think you got paid very much. And I remember, my parents were came from a wonderful family and they supported me through college. But I knew if I wanted to move to New York City, which I did, I was going to have to figure out
Yeah.
something. And so that's when I went back to the drawing board a bit and had some good, not even mentors, I would say, just people in different working career positions saying, like, why don't you consider the agency model, the agency path? And I just started applying. And so that was also during Laws Hall.
Okay.
To your question of whether I was stressed or not, when I graduated, I did not have a job. I had some interviews along the way. So much so that when I graduated, right after I graduated, my mom flew me to, we came to New York. I had interviewed with Microsoft. It was like a big, like
Wow.
kind of formal, but I didn't get the job. I emailed that Laws Hall list of network. I emailed pretty much every single person that had been on that Laws Hall alumni. And I explained who I was and what I did. And I was like, I'm not asking for a job. I'm just asking for like thoughts or perspective or places where I look. And then I did get a job at PhD. It was a media agency, like I said. And yeah, I started working like a month after college. I kind of look back. I kind of look at some of my friends who took the summer off, and I guess I was like, I could have done it different, but I think it probably goes, I just wanted to jump right in. I wanted to like live this life in New York City and figure it out.
You know what? Honestly, like so much of what you said, I think is going to be really refreshing for a lot of people hearing this because I think so many of us have to turn away an opportunity because it financially just doesn't make sense. And like, unfortunately, it's usually like the sexier option. And it's like what you want to do. And like hearing that, like, you turned it down because it didn't make sense and like you were okay and your world did not implode because you said no to one thing.
Yeah.
So many people are going to, especially because like our audience skews younger. And I think a lot of us get in our head of like, gosh, if I don't take this, like I'm losing my ticket to the train or like I'm losing my seat. And so I appreciate like your honesty there and like being very vulnerable and like real that like you do have to consider your financials and like that is an important part of like any gig you take.
Yeah, and also the real of I didn't get every job that I applied
Yeah.
for. I remembered the Microsoft process. I had gone through like 2 interviews. It was such a big, I mean, that was like a very formal, they had put me up in a hotel for, I mean, I remember being like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, this is it." And then I didn't get it. And along the way too, when when I left PhD and I went over to Avon, I think just the real good navigation, I wanted more experience. I knew at the time digital media was really, again, it wasn't that long ago, but it was really becoming much more of a focal point
Yeah.
in terms of how businesses were being operated. And I got my foot in the door there. But even once I was there and I wanted to grow, I knew I had to start. And so I applied to tons of jobs. I applied to LVMH and I didn't get the job at Dior. And like, it
Yeah.
wasn't a perfect linear path, but there always was something that I was looking for more of. Whether it was a new challenge, whether it was I wanted to make more money or I needed to make more
Yeah.
money, but doing it in a way that was still going
Authentic
somewhere
to
that
you.
was going
Yeah.
to add value. So I don't think it's only about one versus the other. And I try to say that a lot when I hire people now. Like, there is no perfect formula. You have to do what's right for you. And there are different moments in your career that one lever might be more important than the other, but I do think you have to kind of trust your abilities and capabilities that people are going to say no to you, and it is okay to sometimes say no if you're in a position to find the next right thing.
I love that. And when you were in that journey of like, you knew you needed something new, but you were also not getting it quite yet, like those rejections are coming in. I think, especially in this current job market, a lot of people relate to that sentiment.
Yeah.
How did you keep it positive to yourself? And also, how did you not lose hope that like something was eventually going to come your way?
Yeah, I do think I I have always had a bit of a, I guess, an optimistic mindset. I say now a lot and probably comes through, like, believe, invest, in 10. I say it a lot about the workplace, when I people on my team maybe misconstrue an email or something happens and you're like, "Just assume best content." Like, most people are not that nefarious, and it's not actually that personal. So I do think that's just kind of been always who I am, but I also think, and again, I realize it's easier said than done, and it's easy for me to sit in the position I'm in now and say it, and a young person might be listening and be like, "That's easy for her to say that." You do sometimes, though, have to take a position that is not perfect, you know? You don't have to stay there forever, but I do think there's value. I think there's value sometimes in taking a position that's maybe not perfect, and or when you get in, you realize, "Wow, that manager is not great." Those are experiences, though, that I think have made me better where I am now because it wasn't always, like, perfect and rosy.
Yeah,
Or easy. So, talking at both sides of my mouth of like, it's okay to say no, but at the same time, certainly when you're earlier on in your career, and I don't even mean younger, I
yeah,
mean like earlier on, just in terms of whatever, even if you change industries, having a bad boss is helpful sometimes. It makes you learn what not to be when you're in a leadership
yeah,
position. Having a job that's really maybe not pushing you or challenging you and feels like boring may teach you, okay, what do you want out of it? Every company, every culture is really different. Sometimes certain people just don't fit, not because they're not smart or they're not great. You have to find the right place for you to let your skills shine. So, yeah, that would be my advice along the way, and just creating your career network, and I we've been talking a lot about that over here. I don't mean like just mentors and mentorship, which I do think is important, but it's more around creating your network of people as you're building your career. Always saying please and thank you and writing good emails and following up, and if someone needs your help, helping, but then when you need something, ask. That is all going to be hugely important along your career, regardless of what industry you're in.
again, I just appreciate how raw you are and like how like realistic you are about like, yeah, like sometimes your job will suck and like it is what it is, but like trust that like you're paving the way to inevitably change it at some point. Like it's helpful and it's real.
I think the things that I get to do now and positions that I've put myself in and or others have helped me get into
Mm.
has been because of growth over time. And I think even now knowing, there were years that I was fortunate to spend at Anheuser-Busch, which is an incredibly amazing, strong business, strong culture, huge expectations, very much target and results driven, but also it was my MBA. I didn't go the traditional route. The way that they taught me how to think, to deliver stories, to build presentations, like we talk about deck making, PowerPoint making. I know how to work in an Excel because I worked at a media agency. Those are really
Yeah.
foundational things that seem somewhat basic at the beginning, but even now in my position, when I'm going to my boss, who's the president, and I'm trying to pitch him to believe that we should start an entertainment studio, which we've now done a year ago, if I didn't have both the art and then the science, which was never my strong suit, but I've had to build it over time to say, here's the business opportunity, but let me also sell it to you in a way that makes you trust what I've done along the way. I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I do think those foundational things, even if they stink sometimes, you gotta do the work.
You
You
do.
gotta do the work and get the work done and hopefully be treated the right way along the way. I don't
That's so helpful. And like I feel like, the overarching theme of a lot of our conversations and even like opportunities you've described you've had is like you always had a strong personal brand. And whether that was, like I don't know if that was like I feel like when people think personal brand and career, like everyone goes to LinkedIn and that's not even what I mean. But like your tenet of curiosity and like letting that lead you and like, being someone who was results driven so that like when the Chiefs were deciding to have a CMO, like you were on the list of people they were calling. How did you maintain it, and how did you bring it to what it was to be tapped for opportunities like this?
I do think putting yourself, in environments that bring out the best in you is really important. Again, I do go back and think through sometimes, I don't I always laugh. I have such a I'm not a good name memory, and so when people are like, "Who'd you have in whatever class at Miami?" I'm like, "I don't know. That's not my strong suit." But I do remember what I do remember is, being in classes and teachers that, like, built my confidence along the way.
Love that.
And, I could say the same thing even in the same example of being in jobs and not getting jobs. I thought I was gonna love psychology. I thought I was gonna, like, crush it.
Yeah.
Did not crush it. It was not for me. And I realized maybe it's because how I learn, how I respond, I was not the best test taker. So, like, those
Me.
types of things, I think Miami had the ability I was able to navigate and find classes and environments that built my confidence instead of necessarily took it away, and I think college gave me that way more than high school did. I never again, I still don't I never have felt like the smartest person in the room. I still am not the smartest person in the room, but I think, it gave me that confidence. And so I think then that has probably been a filter, again, whether I realized it at the time or not, but finding organizations that brought that out in me, of ones that let me be autonomous, environments that like people that challenge the way we do things, but also do it in a way where the relationship's as important
Mhm.
as the result. So yeah, I think some of it was like actually just getting in there and doing it and participating. And then I do think there is self-reflection along the way, and self-awareness to me is such an important skill set that, again, what I look for in talent is, as much as being great at what you do, is having the self-awareness and, like, the soft skills or power skills as people call them now, to be honest, in marketing is just as important.
Yeah.
I don't need, God forbid I have a health problem one day, I don't need my surgeon to do that. Like, I need them to be the best at what they do, like,
100%.
clinically and surgically. But I think in marketing and business and a lot of this world, you need a lot of both to really make yourself successful.
Absolutely, and, like, even earlier in our conversation, you briefly talked about, like, understanding culture, and I feel like that requires both so deeply, and, like, you see so many brands, marketers, people miss the mark on what's going on in the world, or, like, not even in, like, a sense of policing what you say, but, like, just a deep understanding of, like, the landscape we're in.
Yeah. I think, I to the point of the curiosity, I think I'm so glad I went to school somewhere different than where I grew up, and
Yeah,
I had the ability to do that. Again, I realize not everyone does. And so even if it's not physically far from your
yeah,
home, I do think the perspective that you can take from interacting with people that are different from
mhm,
you or from different places. I went to Miami without, again, I knew one person. I remember one of my best friends when I first met her, is from Virginia, and like she had an accent I had never heard before.
yeah,
My now husband can't say growing up I knew where Kansas City was. It wasn't because my parents didn't expose me. It just, I think when you're young, you just
yeah.
are self-centered and focus on yourself. So I just even think of putting yourselves in positions, even if you are from the Miami area or wherever you're in college, I do think being a bit open-minded, I think, is a really big part of it.
I love that, and unfortunately, I do have to pivot us to a bit of a Miami rapid fire for you,
Okay.
as our time together is slowly coming to a close, but these are fan submitted questions, so these are what people
Okay.
really wanna know from you.
Really wanted to know. Okay.
If you could start a business uptown, what would your business be?
Ooh.
This is my favorite one, actually.
That is such a great question. Okay, I don't know what's there now, so I feel
It's
like
okay.
everyone's gonna like, okay. At the time, probably like one of those IV bars. That probably would have been an
Oh,
ad,
like,
like one of those like
Kroger's?
vitamin C.
That's genius. It would go crazy
I
on
think an IV bar would be what we could have, that, an IV bar, a Jimmy John's sandwich.
I'm shocked they still don't have a Jimmy John's, and they could certainly use one.
Wait, they don't have a Jimmy John's?
No.
That was there when I was there. So they got rid of a Jimmy John's.
Unless I'm like if I'm the comments are gonna explode if I got this wrong, but I don't think there's a Jimmy John's in Oxford.
Okay, well, bring back the Jimmy John's Oxford, because that was where we went. So IV bar is what I will say, or IV, clinic, whatever.
Phenomenal answer.
Okay.
That's great. Is there anything left on your Miami bucket list?
Ooh, goodness. I don't know. I do feel like now my bucket list is, I saw that Miami's gonna be building a new, I heard, arena, I believe?
Yes, very controversial, but yeah.
Okay, very controversial, so I don't wanna be in the controversy, but I guess I'll
No,
say
but
that is to
they
come
could
back
use
and
the good PR.
yeah, come back and watch a game and watch about to be honest, I do not think I went to a basketball game in college,
I
not that I
didn't.
remember well, so I guess that would be on my bucket list is come back and watch the girls, the men or the women play.
I love it. Great answer, and they could use a good shout out for the arena, so,
Okay.
um, and then, gosh, I'm trying to remember what our 3rd one was. Ah, yes, if you're going back to Oxford, let's say tomorrow,
Mm.
where's the first place you're going?
Ooh, oh my gosh. Think Okay, I honestly think that probably Brick Street would be the first place.
I love that.
I would then probably stop at, well, I'd have to stop at the merch store. I don't know what they're all called now, but I'd have
Du
to go get
Bois?
some
Yeah.
new yeah, what's it called?
Du Bois?
Oh my gosh, yes, Du Bois.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I would stop there. I think I would probably have to go to the Arch so that my
of
husband and
course.
I don't know, you're supposed to take a picture of yourselves there.
And you're supposed to, like, sneak
Um
at midnight when the light turns on, I believe.
Okay, so we'll have to do that. We did not do that.
There you go.
I would definitely go back to so I went to Emerson. I lived in
Well,
Emerson. My husband lived in Havinghurst on Western
okay.
Campus. So I think we would go there. And then yeah, I think those would be the places. What's the place next to Bagel and Deli? It was a bar that you
Skippers?
could Skippers. Oh my gosh. Yes, and I would probably go to
Skippers is
Skippers
the
and sit
best.
outside and have a beer.
Get a beer tower? Yeah.
I don't know if I could do that anymore, but I could at least have one.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today on We Went to Miami. I think a lot of people are going to be refreshed by your conversation. Someone's surely about to start an IV nurse lounge uptown after this. And also, just I think you gave a lot of people hope about looking forward to your career and like going with the punches, knowing that it's going to work out. I mean, very transparently, I needed that today. So, like,
Yeah.
thank you.
We all need it sometimes. And I will shout out the EVP of stadium operations here at the Kansas City Chiefs is also a Miami alumni. So
Yay!
Matt Kenny can be your future guest. I'll call him out and tell him you guys will reach.
That would be awesome. But seriously, thank you so much, Laura. And if our listeners want to stay connected to all the cool things you're doing or the cool things the company you work for is doing, what is the best way for them to be connected with you?
I would say follow Chiefs on Instagram and TikTok. And follow Chiefs on LinkedIn. And when I have the time and great things to share, I do share on LinkedIn as well. So I would say follow along on Chiefs. And if you want to follow me or connect with me there, that would be where you can find all the good stuff that the Chiefs are doing around the world.
Perfect. And we'll make sure we link all of those platforms Laura just mentioned in our description so you guys can easily click it and stay connected. And
Sounds
Laura,
good.
thank
Thank
you
you so
very
much for having me. I really appreciate it. Good luck with everything.
much. Thank you.